Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Disa, Oktora, Sakinah. I'm from class PBI 5C, and in here I will explain about validity and reliability. The subject is research and development, and the lecturer is Nuardi, SPD, MED. Defining validity. Validity is an important key to effective research. Validity is thus a requirement for both quantitative and qualitative or naturalistic research. In quantitative data, validity might be improved through careful sampling, appropriate instrumentation, and appropriate statistical treatments of the data. Validity must be faithful to its premises, and positivist research has to be faithful to positivist principles. For example, the first, controllability, replicability, predictability, the derivation of laws, and universal statement of behavior, context freedom, fragmentation and atomization of research, randomization of samples, and observability. According to Maxwell 1992 argues for 5 kinds of validity in qualitative methods that explore his notion of understanding. The first is descriptive validity. Descriptive validity is the factual accuracy of the account that is not made up, selective, or distorted. The second is interpretive validity. Interpretive validity is the ability of the research to catch the meaning, interpretation, terms, intention, that situation, and events. The third is theoretical validity. Theoretical validity is the theoretical constructions that the research brings to the research, including that of the researcher. The fourth is generalizability, is the view that the theory generated might be useful in understanding other similar situations. And the last is evaluative validity. Evaluative validity is the application of an evaluative and judgmental. Internal validity. Internal validity seeks to demonstrate that the explanation of a particular event, issue, and set of data which a piece of research provides can actually be sustained by the data. In ethnographic qualitative research, there are several overriding kinds of internal validity. The first is confidence in the data, the authenticity of the data, or the ability of the research to report a situation through the eyes of the participants. The third is the cogency of the data, the soundness of the research design, the credibility of the data, the auditability of the data, the dependability of the data, and the last is the confirmability of the data. External validity. External validity refers to the degree to which the results can be generalized to the wider population, cases, or situations. In naturalistic research, threats to external validity include the first is selection effects, where contracts selected in fact are only relevant to a certain group. The second is setting effects, where the results are largely a function of their context. The third is history effects, where the situation have been arrived at by unique circumstances and therefore are not comparable. The last is construct effects, where the constructs being used are peculiar to a certain group. Construct validity. A construct is an abstract. This separates it from the previous types of validity which deal in actualities defined content. Ecological validity. In quantitative positivist research, variables are frequently isolated, controlled, and manipulated in contrived settings. For qualitative naturalistic research, a fundamental premise is that the researcher deliberately doesn't try to manipulate variables or conditions, that the situation in the research occur naturally. Cultural validity. A type of validity related to ecological validity is cultural validity. According Morgan 1999, cultural validity entails an appreciation of the cultural values of those being researched. This could include understanding possibly different target culture attitudes to research, identifying and understanding salient terms as used in the target culture, reviewing appropriate target language literature, choosing research instruments that are acceptable to the target participants, checking interpretation and translation of data with native speakers, and being aware of one's own cultural filters as a researcher. Catalytic validity. A major feature in feminist research which user suggests needs to permeate all research requires solidarity in the participant and ability of the research to promote emancipation, autonomy, and freedom within a just, egalitarian, and democratic society. Mas Selein, 1991. Consequential validity, partially related to catalytic validity, is consequential validity, which argues that the ways in which research data are used, the consequences of the research, are in keeping with the capability or intention of the research. Criterion related validity. This form of validity endeavors to relate the results of one particular instrument to another external criterion. Tribulation may be defined as the use of two or more methods of data collection in the study of some aspect of human behavior. The use of multiple methods, or the multi-methods approach as it is sometimes called, contrasts with the ubiquitous but generally more vulnerable single method approach that characterizes so much of research in the social science. Types of triangulation and their characteristics. The first is time triangulation, space triangulation, combined levels of triangulation, theoretical triangulation, investigator triangulation, methodological triangulation. Ensuring validity. It is very easy to slip into invalidity. It is both insidious and pernicious as it can enter at every stage of a pitch of research. Reliability in qualitative research. The meaning of reliability differs in quantitative and qualitative research. Reliability in quantitative research is essentially a synonym for dependability, consistency, and replicability over time, over instruments, and over groups of respondents. Reliability as stability. In this form, reliability is a measure of consistency over time and over similar samples. Reliability as equivalence. Within this type of reliability, there are two main sorts. A reliability may be achieved per stroke using equivalent forms, also known as alternative forms, of a test or data gathering instruments. Reliability as internal consistency, whereas the test or retest method and the equivalence form method of the demonstrating reliability require the test or instruments to be done twice. Demonstrating internal consistency demands that the instrument or test be run only through the split half method. Reliability in qualitative research. While we discuss reliability in qualitative research here, the suitability of the term for qualitative research is contested. Validity and reliability in interview. In interviews, inferences about validity are made too often on the basis of face validity. That is, whether the questions asked look as if they are measuring what they claim to measure. Validity and reliability is experiments. As we have seen, the fundamental purpose experimental design is to impose control over conditions that would otherwise cloud the true effects of the independent variables upon the dependent variables. Treats the internal validity. The first is history. Frequently in educational research, even other than the experimental treatment occur during the time between pre-test and post-test observation. Maturation. Between any two observation subjects change in a variety of ways. Statistical regression, like maturation effects, regression effects increase systematically with the time interval between pre-test and post-test testing. Pre-test and the beginning of experiments can produce effects other than those due to the experimental treatments. Instrumentation. Unreliable tests or instruments can introduce serious errors into experiments. Selection. Bias might be introduced as a result of differences in the selection of subjects for the comparison groups, or when intake classes are employed as experimental or control groups. Experimental mortality, instrument reactivity and selection, maturation, interaction. Treats to external validity. The first is to describe independent variables explicitly, lack of representativeness of available and target population. Next, how Turner affects inadequate operationalizing of dependent variables, sensitization or reactivity to experimental conditions. Next, interaction effects of extraneous factors and experimental treatment. And invalidity or unreliability of instruments, and the last, ecological validity. Validity and reliability in questionnaires. Validity of post-all questionnaires can be seen from two viewpoints. First, whether respondents who complete questionnaires do so accurately, honestly, and correctly, and second, whether those who fail to return their questionnaires will have given the same distribution of answer as did the returners. Validity and reliability in observations. There are questions about two types of validity in observation-based research. In effect, comment about the subjective and idiosyncratic nature of the participant observation study are about its external validity. Validity and reliability in tests. The research will have to judge the place and significance of test data, not forgetting the problem of the Hawthorne effect operating negatively or positively on students who have to undertake the test. Source of unreliability. There are several threats to reliability in test and examination, particularly tests of performance and achievement. For example, with respect to examiners and markers. The first is errors in marking, inter-rater reliability, inconsistency in the marker, variations in the award of grades, the halo effect. Validity and reliability in life histories. Three central issues underpin the quality of the data generated by life history methodology. They are to do with representativeness, validity, and reliability. Thank you. That's all for me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.